Hilchas Keilim Perek Chamishi. Kol HaKeilim ein mekabel tumah ad shetigomer melachtam. In order for a keli to be mekabel tumah, it has to be gemar melachte, which means, Vaistis, even if the keli is functional, you could use the keli, but since it's not normal to use this keli until there's gemar melacha, so therefore it doesn't have a din keli until gemar melacha. Now, Cleats me'emesai mekabel tumah, so the Rambam is going to give us different hagdaras of Cleats. Now, b'negei kli matches, we're going to learn behemshech that gol mi kli matches and not mekabel tumah. Knows anything that you're still interested in doing in the kli matches. So over there, since you're not mamish finished completely, so therefore it's not makabel tumah. Mashenki Cleats, over there are certain things that if you don't finish doing it, it isn't makabel tumah. But there are things that even though you intend on doing more to it, but lepel, since at this point in time it's already functional and it's just normal to use it even before you do everything you wanted to do, so therefore it is makabel tumah. That's why there's a difference. Whereas there's a general din, kol hakelim ein makabel tumah ad shetigomer melachtan. The question is, when is considered the Gmar Melacha? Cleats me'emasai mekabel tumah. When is the Cleats mekabel tumah? Is ha'amita v'ha'arisa mishishufein be'er hadag. So as you made a bed or a cradle out of wood, and vices at this point in time it's already functional, but normally you're going to still sand it down with this eir hadag, which vices has a certain like shellac to it, and it adds to the color or to the niceness of the keli. And it's not regular to use it before that, so therefore it's not considered a keli and it's not makabel tumah. Now, however, gomer shalei lashav, if you made up your mind that you have no intention of doing this yeshufim be'er hadag, in other words, you're gonna use it as is, so that is makabel tumah. It's makabel tumah right away. Now, hasalim shalates, the baskets that you make out of wood. So first it has to be mishiachsim sifsisayim. So now the edges, when you make the baskets, so you braid them together, and then you have to at the edges close them up to make sure that they don't open up. So you probably tie them together, or you fold it over. Al kol panim, you do something at the edges to make sure that they don't fall apart anymore. And also the yichreis ukse hasrigim v'ha'itzim aktanim, you have to cut off those little pieces of the twigs or the small pieces of wood. Hayetzim al gabi asag, again, because they're not functional. In other words, it's hard to use it, you're going to scratch your hands. And therefore, you have to do two things. So for these salim shalates, you have to, first of all, you have to close up the sifsisayim, even though it could be used before that. But lepel, the seder is that's what you have to do to finish off the keli. And also to cut off those little pieces which would normally disturb someone from being able to use this salim. Now, hoya salim shel tmara, if the salim was made out of a palm tree, so memela from lulav branches. So memela, those branches that stick out, if they stick out a little bit in the sal, it's not really so disturbing because they're soft. Oh yeah, salim shel tmara is afal pi shlei karas achutzim bifnim. Even if you didn't cut off those edges that are sticking out in the sal, nevertheless is mekabel tumah shekach mekayim meisa. That's how you mekayim it. So the Rambam spoke about the salim shalates, and also beneged the salim shel tmara. He spoke about amita and arisa, and the salim shalates, and also salim shel tmara. Now hakalkola is also a basket, but it's a basket that has something goes over it that you can hang it up with. In other words, on top of it, there's something to hold it with. The kalkola is also mishiachsim piyah. So again, you have to close the edges of it. In other words, make sure that the tops of it should be completely closed. You shouldn't be able to fall apart anymore. And also the yichris hahutzim, and you also have to cut off those hutzim which you mentioned before, b'negei regular salim. And over here is the yigmeres atluyas. You also have to finish off that part which the kalkol is normally hung with. So that also has to be finished, because that's how the kalkol is used, as a sal which could be hung. You could maybe hold it with your hand, or you hang it somewhere else. So memela, so you have to finish that off in order for it to be considered a finished keli. Now, beis hakoises v'haliginim. If you have a basket which you keep with the cups, koises, or liginim. Liginim is like little jugs. Is aval pi shalei karas bifnim. Since you're not putting your hand in there, you're putting the koises in there. So therefore, the fact that something is sticking out over there doesn't really disturb. When you have put something in the basket, you have to put your hand in there to take it in and out. So then it's very disturbing, or it could hurt the items that you're putting in. It could also tear them. Masha'inkin, when you have cups, koises and liginim, so over there it's not a problem that these things are sticking out is afal pishali karas mebifnim mekabim tuma. Why shekach mekaymen oisan? It's regular to hold these baskets without cutting off these edges. Now haknoinim haktanim v'hakloses. Knoinim haktanim are plates, or either large plates or small plates. Is mishiyachsem sifsiseyim. Once you again close off the edges. In other words, make sure that the edges where you finished it off should be closed in a sense that it's not going to fall apart anymore. And also v'yichreis hahutzim hayetzim. You have to cut off the hutzim hayetzim. Al derech we learned before b'negei saum shaleitz. Now that was talking about haknoinim haktanim v'hakloses. Now haknoinim hagdolim v'asyugim hagdolim. When we're talking about the larger knoinim and these larger vessels, so therefore, this type of a vessel really isn't used until you have some type of a border on the outside. In other words, the vessel, we're talking about knoinim, ktanim, and kloses, so mustama, it goes in a little bit, it goes in like our plates, it goes in a little bit, and therefore that's how it could be a recipient. Mashenkin, these knoinim agdelim and syugim agdelim, you make a border on the outside of it. So now the question is, how do you make a border? So again, you braid something. You braid again with whatever leaves or whatever material you were using to make the keli itself, which is the bottom of the keli. So you extend and do also the side of the keli. Now, when you extend, there could be one row, there could be two rows. In other words, there's vices a certain size for the row, and there would be a regular that such a keli would have two rows of two times that you go around the keli with this braid, and that gives the wall to the keli. Is nachamal haknoinim agdolim v'asyugim agdolim, with the larger plates and the larger serving trays, is misiyase shnei durim l'reichav shalem. When you make two rows, you have to have two rows of these braided material that you make. So in order there should be a border on the outside, it should be able to hold things. And hanofa v'hakvara v'kaf maznayim. So over here you're talking about a sift, or a kvara is also a different type of sift. And v'kaf maznayim is something that the pan for the scale. So also you want to have a little border around it to make sure things don't fall off. Al-derez when you're sifting through flour, so you're going to put flour on it, so you don't want the flour to fall off on the sides. So therefore you're going to have a little wall around this sift. So mishiyase dur echad l'reichav shalom. Over there, you don't need two rows. Over there, it's enough one row. I'm not sure exactly the tzir, but the point is that you have a keli, and this keli normally is used by having something around the keli, to be like a wall around the keli. The question is, what's the normal height for such a keli to have the border around it? So b'negeya knunim agdelim, so b'negeya knunim aktanim aklosses, you don't need anything. As soon as it's finished, and you do the edges, and you make sure there's nothing sticking out that could be disturbing, so then it's a keli. Mashenkin knunim agdelim and siyugim, over there you need two durim. And as far as nofa, kvara, and kaf miznayim, these items, which also your vices put a border around it, but over there it's not. You don't need shnei durim. It's enough with dur echad. Now hakupa is a box. Also, vices it was a certain size, which was considered a normal kupa. Is mishiyase shtei tzvireis l'reichav shelo, which the shtei tzvireis is also the border, but by the durim, the pshat is you make a border. It's a whole border one around, and then on top of it you make another border around. Mashenkin, the tzvireis is like the border goes into the border. In other words, you go around and then you start going up over the one that you went around. That would be the difference between durim and tzvireis. So over here you need shtei tzvireis l'reichav shelo. V'ho'arak, which is another type of a box. It's a box which vices normally that box doesn't have such a high wall around. Is mishiyase beitzvira achas. Over there it's enough one tzvira. Again, the tzir exactly is hard to know because we don't have that actual picture over here from the Keilim, that we don't know what the Keilim look like. But I'll call upon him. So we're learning here. There's a keli called a kupa, and there's a keli called an arak, and there's a knunim aktanim and knunim agdoilim, and these are all different types of kelim. And the question is whether or not they need a border around it in order for it to be considered a keli, and also how high the border has to be. That's the nekudas advar. That's the nekudas advar. V'harak mishiyashu b'tzvira achas, afal pi sheli gomar gabeim, even though you didn't finish Now it says here gabein, but really it should mean govon. They changed the gear so it knows even though you're intending on making it taller, but at this point in time, it's this height is nevertheless mekablim tuma. Why? Sharim nira l'mashal nasu. You could see the purpose of the keli and v'tzuras hakelim elim and aleim, and it already has a tzuras hakeli. In other words, even though your intent is making a keli with a higher wall, but since this wall is already functional and you could see the purpose of this keli by having this small wall, you could really see the general idea of the purpose of this keli. So maybe it's fine. You have an intention of weaving a large beged, and lepel you only wove a small beged. So lepel, this small beged is makabel tuma, even though your intent is to add to this beged and to make it larger. Hamachzelis, when you have a mat, is mishiyichris hahutzim. You have to cut off those hutzim that are sticking out of it. And v'zeo gmar malachim, that's called the gmar malacha. V'chol kli hanusarim, and any keli that's made out of nesarim, nesarim is wood, pieces of wood, but it means like pieces of branches or twigs, is eina mekablim tumma, achi is chasmu sifsisayim. Any keli that's made out of nesarim, so nesarim is like pieces of wood, that are obviously soft pieces of wood, so you have to close off the edges. As we mentioned, you close off the edges to make sure that it shouldn't fall apart. So that's the end of that. Now, golme Cleats. Now here the Rambam is saying that we learned before that there was sholish midas b'Cleats, and there was a Cleats that was mishamish adam, and there was a Cleats that was mishamish keli, and there was a Cleats that was mishamish adam and a keli. Now we're talking about a keli which is actually a Cleats which is a makabel. The Cleats is a makabel. Now the question is, it's not finished yet. It's not a finished makabel because it's golem Cleats. Golem means it's not a finished product. So you have like a piece of wood, and that piece of wood you carved out already a keli, so it's already a makabel. But on the other hand, you still intend of maybe making still certain shapes on the keli, to engrave on the keli, to make the keli nicer. So again, when we're talking about a matchis, as we learn behemshech, so a golem kli matchis is not makabel tum. Mashenkin golem kliates, since a kliates is not so choshev, so therefore once it's a kliates and it's royal ishtamshus, therefore it's considered a keli. Golem kliates is makabel tum mishanasa keli b'tzurasi. As soon as the keli is already in the tzura of the keli, aval pisha asad letare b'sered, you still intend maybe of, let's say, coloring it with sered, with a certain dye, or you're going to make it straight. In other words, it's not exactly straight on the top, so you're going to use this mechuga, which is an instrument to straighten out the keli, or you're going to use an instrument to shave it down, in other words, for it to be smoother. So at this point in time, it's a gelim, which means it's an unfinished product. It's not necessary anymore to dig anything out. In other words, the receptacle aspect of the keli is already there. In other words, you had a piece of wood and you engraved in, you dug into this piece of wood, and now you have the receptacle of this piece of wood. So the receptacle aspect of the piece of wood is already there. It's just that the decorative aspect, in other words, the aesthetics, in other words, the functional aspect of the keli is already there. It's a keli that's able to contain whatever it's supposed to contain. It's just that the presentation of the keli, in other words, the aesthetics of the keli, you still are interested in maybe dyeing it, you're still interested in straightening it out, you're interested in smoothing it out, is all of these things. Nevertheless, hareze mekabel tuma. V'chol kli kol mikliates mekabel tuma. All kol mikliates, in other words, any wood that it's made out of. But again, the functional aspect of the kliates is already there. It's just that it's not there. The additional decorative aspect of the kliates is not there. Aber chutz mishel eshkerei, except for eshkerei, which is a special type of cedar wood, which is an expensive wood. She'ein akeli mimenu chashuv keli, because since it's an expensive wood, so it's not really only using the keli for the functional aspect. You also want the keli for the decorative aspect, and therefore it's aches shapa, until it becomes completely nice. In other words, you do all the decorations that you want to do on this keli, and only then is a keli shel eitz of eshkereya, while it's a goylem klietz makabel. It's not while it's a goylem klietz, it won't be makabel tuma. It has to become uis goylem klietz. It has to become aches yapa. Then the Ram was talking about a Kli Eitz. Kli Etzem, Kli Eshkereya. Kli Etzem is also something that's made out of bone, is also more of an expensive item, and therefore, so notice fakert, the more choshev it is, the more of a reason is that it's not Makabel Tumah. In other words, when it's not so choshev, so memela, as long as it's functional, it's Makabel Tumah. Masha'inkin, when it's choshev, so there's more of a svara that since it's choshev, therefore it's not Makabel Tumah. So therefore, the Karav Be'ena Shekli Etzem is Kli Eshkereya. It's like a Shkli Eshkereya, which Ve'en Gol Mei Mekabel Tumah. That's it. That's the Nekudas Hadvar. Kli Eitz She'en Olav Tzuras Keli Aval Pi Shemishtamshem Be'en Mekabel Tumah. Now here we're going to learn L'chura. There's a new din b'negei Kli Eitz. We learned earlier that there was Sholish Midas b'Kli Eitz. If a Keli is Mishamish Adam, there was a Keli that was Mishamish Adam v'Keilim, and then a Keli that was Mishamish Keilim. And in that gufa we had, whether it's b'shas malacha or also shalei b'shas malacha. Now we're learning up some new din b'negei keli. Vaisa this kli eitz is something which is mekabel, but it doesn't have really a kli kibul. It's something you put things on, like you put. It's a flat piece of wood, but on the other end you put an isa on it, you put chalas on it, whatever. So here we're saying that if this keli has a tzuras hakeli, so then it's mekabel tumah, even though it's a kli eitz and it's a pshuta kli eitz. But as long as it has a tzuras hakeli, so therefore it's mekabel tumah. But if it doesn't have a tzuras hakeli, so then it's not mekabel tumah. So Moshe, we had a ladder which is mishamshei adam. So it wasn't. It has a tzuras hakeli. You could see it's a ladder, but lepel is mishamshei adam. So therefore it's not mekabel tumah. Over here we're talking about something which you put things on it. You put things on it, so it's like a mekabel. But on the other end, it's not really mekabel because it's pshuti kli eitz. So therefore, here it depends whether or not it has a tzuras keli. That's l'chura de pshat over here. Again, kli eitz she'enol of tzuras keli. If it doesn't have a tzuras keli, aval pi shemishtamshem, you use this kli eitz. Nevertheless, is eini mekabel tumah. Says they, arube shel nachtumim. In other words, those pieces, the flat pieces of wood of a baker, shesoidun aleim achalis kshein botzik, that you prepare the chalis on it when they're still dough, is mistamis shaharei tzuras hakeli aleim. So even though it's not really a makabel, it's a flat piece of wood, but there's vices of tzuras hakeli. You could see that this is the aruba shel nachtonim. However, v'shal balabatim, a piece of wood that the balabatim use, so they don't use like such a big piece of wood. And also could be it's not really such a designated piece of wood. Dafka for this could be they use this piece of wood for all kinds of different things, as well as being masada the chalas when they bake. So therefore, v'shal balabatim ain't a makabel tumah because it doesn't have a tzuras hakeli. However, v'imtzovan b'sikrei b'charkim b'keitzbem, if you dyed them, and notice you did something, a pu'ula, in order to designate them for this pu'ula, and you dyed them, so then it's mistamish shari nasas lam tzuras hakeli. Because the point is that right now it has a tzuras hakeli. Now, srud shel nachtumim, again, it's a type of flat piece of wood that shenoisen behamayim shemekatvam be, that you put the water on it, which you use. In other words, when you bake, so you take a little water to smear over the challah, over the dough, in order for it not to bake well. So it's not so clear, l'chura, if you're putting mayim, because Mishnah is, l'chura, if you're putting mayim on it, so l'chura, we have to say that it's as a klei kibul. If it's a klei kibul, so what's there to talk about? This whole din of whether it has a tzuras hakeli or not a tzuras hakeli is obviously talking about it's not a klei kibul. If it has, it's mamish a klei kibul, so there's nothing to talk about that it's considered a keli. So it's hard to understand the tzir exactly. Some people say no, that there's water like lying on a flat piece of wood, and memela you take off that water even though it doesn't really have a klei kibul. It's not so clear the tzir. But I'll call upon him srut, or some people want to say that there's like a bowl on top of the wood. I'll call upon him srut shenachtumim sheneisen beimayim. You put the water on the srut, and shemekatvam bei, that you use it to fagletten the top of the botzik when you're baking it. So if it's a nachtumim mistami, v'shabalabatim tor, because shabalabatim is smaller and it doesn't have a tzuras hakeli. If you put like some type of a border from four sides, so it's able to be makabel. You know, it's mamish a klei kibul because it has a border. It's not like a regular keli, but it's a flat piece of wood which has a border on it from all four sides. Is mistame. Now nifras miruach achas, but if one of the sides fell off, in other words, it opened, it's only on three sides to start. That's the so bekitzer. So we're saying again, we have something, a board over here, and that board, either you put chalas on it, dough on it, so we say there's a difference. If we're a nachtem or a balabayis, and there's something, you put water on it, not so clear the tzir, and it's a difference if it's something that the nachtem uses or the balabayis uses. If you have a border, if you make a border, a gifafei, mi'aber ruchesav, so then it's considered a kli kibul, as long as it's mi'aber ruchesav. But if one of those ruches fell off, so then it's no longer a makabel. V'haluach she'erchen olav, that luach that you put the baked chalas on top of it, mistame over here, the Rambam doesn't make a distinction between a nachtim and balabais. Could be a balabais also has a tzuras hakeli, such a luach which erchen olav. Then the Rambam continues, Cleats, sha'salosim miraktim olav. In other words, when they go ahead and they sift through the flour, so the flour goes through the sift and it falls down, so you have this Cleats, which the flour goes down into it. Mirak nolavas aselis is mistame. Since these are salosim, these are people that work professionally with sifting flour, so therefore that keli is definitely that keli that they have on the bottom, which is going to receive these sailors, even though it's flat, but nevertheless it has a tzuras hakeli, and therefore it's mistame. However, vishal balabatim, the keli which is used by balabatim, which is also flat, but on the other end it doesn't have a tzuras hakeli, is third. That's nekudas advarim. So we're talking something that contains something, it doesn't really have a recipient, doesn't have a klikibul, and then it depends whether or not it has a tzuras hakeli, doesn't have a tzuras hakeli. Rachas hagroisis. Rachas is a type of shovel, which in groisis are like broken pieces of beans. So you'd shovel up and pick up those pieces of beans and put it somewhere. So mela, since it's something which contains something, knows it picks it up, even though it might be flattish, but on the other end it picks it up and it holds it in it, so therefore mistamis. However, shel oitzos, if you have, let's say, a warehouse, and you have, let's say, of tfuah, and you want to gather together the tfuah which is left, the little pieces of tfuah left all over the place, so you're not really picking it up, you're just gathering it, is tahira. And the same thing, shel gites, if you use a rachas in a gas, where the gas, you press the wine, you have left over the peels of the wine, of the grapes, and you pick them up, so mistama, because these rachas is being used to transport something, to hold something. However, vishal grun is something in a geirin, and that rachas is again being used not to pick something up, but rather to gather, to move it, using it more of like a shovel, as a broom than a shovel. So then it's tahir. Something that's made in order to receive something, in order you put something in it, you pick something up with it, so it's mekabel tumah. However, v'asi lechan is beistor. So that's the general rules of various different things. So the rules is, first of all, it has to be, the keli has to be reach a point where it's normally used at that point in time. That was the various different things we had at the beginning of this sif. It has to be reach a point where it's normally used. And now we're saying that something which actually is used, but it's a pshuti kliates, so in order for it to have a din tumah, is only if it has a tzuras hakeli. That was the chili between shabalabayis or shalnat tumah, whether or not it has a tzuras hakeli, that it's a recipient. Halacha base. Kol hatluyin toirin. Tluyin are like hangers. Whereas you have a keli and you want to be able to hang it up, so you tie, like, say, something to it, and then when you want to hang it up, you hang it up by its hanger, so to speak. You have a hanger attached to it. Now this hanger is not really part of the keli; it has nothing to do with the keli. So therefore, kol hatluyin toirin chutz mitluye nafesh shel salatin. So when you have a sift of a salus, or a tlui kvara shel granis, or the kvara is also a type of sift, that sieve that you use in the geirin, in a place where you thresh the tfuah and you gather the tfuah, and also a tlui magal yad, that's also a hanger of a magal yad. A magal yad is a sickle which you use to cut tfuah with. It's like a special type of knife. And also a tlui makal b'habaloshin. That's the handle that you put on a stick of the baloshin. Baloshin are the people that collect taxes, and then they have a stick to go around the house to see whether or not they could find something which is really taxable. So I'll call upon them. So these hangers, this tlui nafesh shel salotin, the tlui kvara shel grunts, and the tlui of magal yad, and the tlui makal baloshin, so they are mekabel tumah. Why? Mipnei shehin misayin b'shas malacha. The Zvaistu is that, when you have something which really doesn't add anything during the malacha, it's just used to hang something up when you want to store it, so then that's absolutely Torah. Masha'inkin, if you have, for example, you want to sift something, so you have to hold it, and you want to make sure that it doesn't slip out of your hand. So memeli, you have like something like a hanger, and you hang it on your wrist, in order so when you're sifting it, it should make sure that it shouldn't go out of your hand. And Aldera said the other things that mentioned, which is the Kfar Shel Granis and Magal Yad and Makal Abaloshin, all of these things, while you're actually doing something with this keli, you hang up this hanger, so to speak, on your wrist, and therefore it causes it to remain tighter on your hand. So Memela is Messiah b'shas ha'malacha. Zaklal ha'asi l'sayah b'shas ha'malacha mistami. However, little is be'akeli b'lvad. If the whole purpose of this hanger is only to hang up the kelis, is tor. Halacha Gimel Nivle hamsherim mistamin. Nivle is a type of keli that they use to play music. And vice versa, the Seder was that, like today we also have it, that people play music and people throw their money. And they would take this money and put it into the navel. The navel had like a place to be able to contain things. So therefore it's like a kli kibul, and therefore it's mistamim. Nivle hamsherim mistamim. And v'nivle b'nei Levi shemizam ben b'migdash, so those nevolim, they didn't put anything into those navel, mele is tahir. Habitnein, that's a bitne is a type of klikshir that you put on your stomach. V'haniktemein, niktemein is a type of klishir which looks like a leg. V'eris is a round klishir. All these Keilim Vaistus also have a clay kibble, and you can put something in it to hold it, and therefore mistam they're mistam. It's hard to know what the exact tzir. I mean, there's pictures of the tzirim, but you have to know exactly what was the tzir of these type of Keilim. So we're learning a bitnein and a niktemein and an erus, and then there's the navel of the mesheririm. Halacha daled mitzudas hachulda mistami. So a mitzuda, a trap that you put for a chulda, for a weasel, is mistami. And b'shalach barim, but the one that you put for a mouse is teira. L'fisha eino lok base kibble, because this doesn't have a base kibble. Ve'eno that tzuras keli. So memela it doesn't have a base kibble and it doesn't have a tzuras keli. So therefore it's not makabel tuma. Masha'inkim mitzudas achulda. Vaistus either has a base kibble or it has a tzuras akeli. You know that we're learning over here. Even if it doesn't actually have a base kibble, but if it has a tzuras akeli, it's enough to be mistami. That's what we're learning about the things of the flat pieces of wood that a nachtem uses. Al kolpon, if it has a tzuras akeli, it's mustami. That's sure. Koitzim she'orgim mehem k'moy kfifa shemanichim bo ha'te'enim. A koitzim normally is translated as thorns. So over here, the part says some translated as twigs. Whereas you have pieces of wood which you weave from it like a little bag, and you put the figs into it, the keitzim. So this bag is a kelim meilus mustamin. However, v'sha'orgim mehen kitavnus megura gdela sha'itzim b'machitim. If you weave from them, or you weave from them a large container which you're going to store chitim, so therefore it's a large container, and you're not going to be able to really carry this container while all the chitim are in. This tehera she'ein teres keli Allah. So he brings, because it's considered a keli sheba b'midah. That's the Ram doesn't say it, but that's the pshat. That since it's a megura gdela, so therefore it's a kli'etz abba b'midah, and therefore it's not makabel tumah. Now, olin leaves shemesar ganesim k'min siyog savel the peiros. You make it like a little wall around peiros. In other words, it's containing the peiros. Vices, the peiros are contained within it. Is Torah. However, v'im also siyog shel nesarim. If you made a siyog shel nesarim, which is more firm, in other words, olin is weaker. So therefore, it's not something of davar shel kayama. So therefore, it's Torah. Mashenkin, it's a siyog shel nesarim, even though it's not really a klei kibul. We're not talking about. It's talking about nesar ganesim savel lepeiros, but it's some type of a. In other words, it's holding the peiros, even though it doesn't really have a receptacle, but it's holding the peiros. And vice versa, it's considered that it has a tzuras hakeli, this siyog shel nesarim. So therefore, it's mustam. Choisel shel hutzin shemanichen bei haroitev. So again, hutzin is branches or willows that you put the roitev means fresh dates. Fresh dates, that's called roitev. So you have this bag of hutzin that you put these fresh dates into it. So the question is, how are you using this bag? Is it monetel l'teich, neisel l'teich, v'netel l'teich? You know, as you keep the bag, you take it out and you put it in, but the bag still remains intact. Is mistami. So this chesel is really a keli, and therefore it's mistami. However, in order to be able to take something out of it, you're going to have to either tear this choisel or untie it to make it uis choisel. That's one option. Your intent was only to use it for a one-time use. You have no intent of reusing it. Is Torah. So here we're learning that if you have a keli, and depending if you intend on using it for a one-time use or for more than one-time use, that will determine whether or not it's a keli or not. So in other words, you have this choisel shulhutzin, which is possible to use it more than once. In other words, if it's not possible to use it more than once, or no, once you take things out, you can't reuse it. At that point in time, it's not a keli, so it's not a keli. Masha'en came, if it's shaykhs to use it and reuse it, so it depends. If you're intending on eating masha b'teicha and then to throw it out, so then it's not a keli, because lepel, you have no intention of it being a keli, even though it is a keli be'etzem. But what vice is, if you have no intention of using it as a keli, so even though you're using it now as a keli, but as a one-time keli, it's not mekabel tumah. But masha'inkin, if you intend on reusing it, so then it is mekabel tumah. That's the Chura says here clear. V'chein hakeren. A keren is a horn. Shu mishtamish bo'u mashlicha. You're using the horn, and then you're just going to throw out the horn. Is eina mekabelas tumah. That horn is not mekabel tumah. However, if your intent is to use this horn on a regular basis, so then the kabelas tumah. So again, your machshava, whether or not this horn is going to be used by you more than once. In other words, the one time that you're using it is not enough to be mekabel tumah. It has to be something that you're intending on using it on a regular basis. So then, if you intend on using it on a regular basis, mekabel tumah. But if your intention is to throw it out, it's not mekabel tumah. Now, Shaffer. Now, I'm not sure what's the difference between the horn and the Shaffer. In other words, Shaffer, normally there's on the behemoth there's the horn that comes out of the behemoth, and on top of that horn there's a Shaffer. And the Shaffer is like a covering to the horn. And you take off the Shaffer, and like the horn is taken out of the Shaffer. That's the way it is. So he says, this Shaffer is eini mekabel tumah. Not sure why. Shaffer is not mekabel tumah because you have no intention of using it as a kli kibul. It was never made to be a kli kibul. It was made to be a Shaffer. A Shaffer maybe was made to be a Shaffer as a Shaffer that you need for a Shoshana. So that's not mekabel tumah. It's open from both sides. It's not a kli kibul. Maybe that's what the Ram was talking about. Chod chayli is keren tashmish. If you cut the Shaffer up and with the intent of making it into a keren tashmish, so then it's mekabel tumah. Halacha tes. Amal they would use this Shaffer. There would be or a karen. They would use also like a bottle for a child. In other words, they would fill. We find that they would fill up the bottle. They would fill up the Shaffer with, let's say, milk or whatever, and then there would be like a little hole on the bottom, and that hole that would drip into the child. The baby would be able to eat from the Shaffer. The baby would be able to eat from the Shaffer. So Shaffer was really something that would be used. But the question is, was there intent of using it, or no? There was no intent of using it. Halacha tes. Ka'ora shekava b'shida tevo migdal. So you have a shida tevo migdal as a box, and normally we said before that a shida tevo migdal is bistoma, is something which is a Cleats osi l'nachas, and on that shida tevo migdal you attached a plate. Now, imu b'der kabbalasa, even if the way the plate, the shida tevo migdal is standing now, and the way the plate is attached to the shida tevo migdal, this plate could contain something. You could put things in the plate as being attached to the shida tevo migdal. So it's mekabelas tumah. So the car is still mekabel tumah. It didn't lose its mitzias as being a plate, which is a kli kibul. However, v'im kavan b'defen, if you connected it to the defen, so therefore it's not standing on top of the shida teva migdal, it's on the side of the shida teva migdal. So in its present state, it can't really be makabel because it's standing. The makabel of the plate is in a vertical position. It wouldn't be able to be makabel this plate unless you turn over the shida. Is harezeh miklal shida. Now it becomes part of the shida and teira because the shida b'pashtus is a klietz ha'asei l'nachas. Halacha yud ha'akun, which is a type of basket which is used to catch fish. V'retev, something that's used to catch birds. V'hakluv, and that's something, a place where you, like a coop where you keep the birds. Shalates, or pashtus shalates is going on all three. Ha'akun, v'retev, ha'kluv, shalates are all tehirim because vices they don't have a kli kibul and they don't have a tzuras hakelim. Don't know the tzir exactly. Hamadav v'hapalzur u'mitzuda sakorim. Madav and palzur is something which is used in order to catch birds. U'mitzuda sakorim, that's a mitzuda. In other words, you have a dam which is holding back the water, and then you have vice something where you let some of the water of the dam go out, and then that water goes into an area, and whatever fish is in that water is trapped in that area where that water of the dam is going out. That's the Matsuda Sakorim. Sakorim is a place where you hold back the water, and the Matsuda Sakorim is the place where you trap that fish that's coming out through the dam. So all of these three things are mistamim, sharei tzuras akeli aleim. They all have a tzuras akeli, and since they have a tzuras akeli, so therefore they're mistamim. Halacha Yud Beis. Hasafsolim shebe pundikois. You have benches in pundikois. The word pundikois is not important over here. Whereas the point is that they would have benches, and that these benches would be in a way that they wouldn't always need the benches. So when you'd have benches that you needed, so you'd build a bench, and that was it. Mashenka over here, when the pundikois in places, or shamalam de tunekas, a person was teaching children, so he taught children in his house. So when the children were there, he needed to have a bench. When the children weren't there, he didn't need a bench. Now, so he's going to build a bench. He's not going to be able to do anything with the bench. So what he would have would be a makeshift bench. He would have a board of wood, and in that board of wood he would have holes, and then he would have legs, and he would put those legs in those holes, and then there would be a bench. And then when they would finish using the bench, so they would take the legs out of those holes, and then you would have the legs, and then you would have the piece of wood, and you would store it away somewhere. That would be easier than storing a bench. So Asaf Soloim Shebibchuntekois, which the port knows these are safson, which were used sometimes, and sometimes they weren't necessary, or v'shemalam de tinekes, or of people that taught children, malam de tinekes, is afal pi shehem nekuvim, even though they have holes in it, or machnisim be'amas raglayim, and you could put the raglayim of these safsolim into them, harei lo teherim, nevertheless they're Torah.